I'm here in Osceola, Wisconsin, on the trails that are on the bluffs over the St. Croix River. And we're a good 200, 300 feet up in the air here, as I've explained. And I stopped here because I noticed this outcropping along these sheer cliff drop-offs. And it just so beautifully shows that this was all limestone. And as I've said in previous videos, the reason that's important is because this was the bottom of an ocean. And we know by the fossils that they find that it was a saltwater ocean, which means that this was the bottom, the low point, if you will, as part of the water systems of the earth at that time. In the cataclysm, an escallopment occurred of the river, and that caused a huge amount of matter to be thrown up into the air. And in particular, you can see up here that rocks that continue to be, drawn into that arc were metamorphed. So we have limestone here in the cliff, seeing that this was clearly limestone, and yet there is dolostone and probably some granite boulders here. Very large ones, right? So there has to be a process by which you get granite rocks on top of limestone rocks, and the answer is it happened through a metamorphic process in the cataclysm. In a second, we'll look at another example up here that points to the extraction of rock from this area where rocks were literally thrown up at an angle. Now here we're about 30 feet from that, clear limestone striated outcropping, and we find a giant piece of rock. Again, if this is limestone, this should all be limestone. I'm only 30 feet from this thing. It's not like a giant radical change in location. And this limestone boulder is literally at a 45-degree angle, as if something lifted it up. And the answer is it did. In the cataclysm, a giant arc of electricity yanked matter up into the air, and rocks in certain areas maintained that position after the cataclysm had completed this part of the cycle. And so we see this clearly in these rock formations. This also explains why this, eastern side of the St. Croix River has such a sheer cliff drop-off. This was literally the probably most affected of the two sides. But, you can look behind me. I'm way up in the air, guys. I'm 200-300 feet up in the air over the river. And, you can't say, well, a flood came through, Bob, and it pushed it up. I'm too high. If a flood hit this area of this bluff and pushed this rock up into the air, then we need to talk about that other cataclysm. And that one was the Noah flood cataclysm. But even that one, if you want to understand more about what happened to the rocks and everything, all of the sand that would have been pulverized and laying across this area in that second flood, it just flooded down into the valley, and that's where we end up with these, flat, long areas along these riverbeds, as you clearly see here in the in the St. Croix River Valley. Peace, everybody.